a broadcast service of City College and the San Diego Community College District. This is Jazz FM 88.3 KSDS San Diego. I'm Dave Drexler with Inside Art. Support for Inside Art comes from the members of San Diego's Jazz 88.3. This week on Inside Art, we'll preview a special fundraiser marathon featuring 30 consecutive jazz events over 30 hours at the Jazz Lounge, May 29th and 30th. Speaking of the Jazz Lounge, they'll also be honoring a recent San Diego transplant who's become an indispensable presence and promoter of jazz in our community. Saxophonist, composer, arranger, educator, photographer, and author Paul Combs will be honored June 7th with a concert celebrating his 80th birthday. Combs has enjoyed a lengthy career as a bandleader, radio host and producer, and acclaimed biographer of one of jazz's most influential composers and arrangers, Tadd Dameron, with his 2012 book, Dameronia. But that's just one chapter of the Paul Combs story, as his life and musical journey has led him through the major jazz, folk, and classical music centers of America. Paul Combs, congratulations on your milestone birthday, and welcome back to Inside Art.
Thank you, Dave. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, Paul, there's so much to your career, worth celebrating, of course, but I wanted to go back to the obscure things that people don't really know a lot about to start with. You were born in St. Louis, is that right?
That's correct. And I moved when I was 6 years old.
And then where did you head off to?
Well, ended up in Philadelphia. That's where I really grew up.
Well, Philadelphia is famous for its musical programs and, jazz history, of course.
Yes, it is.
And what was your, exposure to music in general? Did it come from, the family members, or was it the schools?
Unfortunately, not much from family. My first musical education came at church from the choir director, organist. Our church had a rather small, modest congregation. And so the choir was open to people of all ages. And we rehearsed every week. And this man taught us to breathe and to listen for blending our voices and so on. So that was, I was maybe 7 years old. Where that started. And then a couple of years later, I had the opportunity to take up the trombone and play in the elementary school band. And then a few years later, at the inspiration of James Moody, I switched to saxophone. And unfortunately, I was in a school for junior high that didn't have a band program, but and then it sort of went on from there. I took an interest in classical composition. And after high school, I attended the Philadelphia Musical Academy, which became later the University of the Arts, which we sadly saw fold in a couple of years ago. And after graduating there, well, it takes us to something you asked me about before, which was my career in radio, which wasn't terribly long, but was there. And I worked at WUHY, as it was called then, in Philadelphia. And I was hired to expand their broadcast day. So I had this long musical program in the morning, and eventually ended up programming 36 hours a week of music at WUHY. And I also worked briefly at a commercial station. And so anyway, that's...
And so those formative experiences in radio in the late 60s and early 70s must have given you entree into the actual performance world as well, and getting to know all these musicians in Philadelphia, both classical with the, fabulous Philadelphia Orchestra and the great jazz artists to come out of there.
Well, yes, I did. I did get to meet and know a bit several of the people, but I didn't stay in Philadelphia all that long. There was I don't know how far I want to go into this, but there was a problem with a man who had risen up through the police department who became mayor, and I had had quite enough of him, and I left around 71, I guess. Yeah,
Was that Mr. Rizzo?
that was Frank Rizzo. Yeah,
Okay. That's the subject of another book, isn't it?
that's a whole nother set of stories, man. Yeah.
Well, all right then. But then you found yourself among the folk circles as well. That's a whole other world that you got into.
Yes, it was. Uh, I had a good buddy in high school, and he had two sisters. I was only an only child. He lived closer to the high school, much closer than I did, and I sort of became the fourth child in the house. And his oldest sister, Alex Dobkin, was a performer on the national folk circuit. And so I would be having dinner at the Dobkins house with people like Dave Van Ronk and people of that level, along with his sister. And so I sort of had this social connection with the folk music world, even though I was already very, very much a lover of jazz and was getting ready to go to conservatory. So around the time that I was working in radio, I had also I had played in a band throughout high school that was just what we call a general business band. And as the music was changing, I started to double on electric bass, and I ended up. Uh, Alex decided that she was tired of being on the road, and she was the opening act at a place called the Gas Lamp. Um, it was one of the main clubs in Greenwich Village, and I would pre-record my Friday music programs for WUHY, and I'd take the train or the bus and go up to New York. And Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, I would accompany her on bass, and that sort of brought me into that world for a while. And for a couple of reasons, I don't know. I ended up falling in with people who had a bunch of musicians who had taken over an art gallery that was started by a bunch of artists, and that had regular folk music concerts. And I had fooled around with the guitar for quite a while, and uh, it was a combination of there was a chance for work and and also a chance to explore uh, something from my own heritage that my father had turned his back on. My father was from Appalachia, but he was a college professor, and he didn't. He kind of, he taught himself how to not sound like he came from Kentucky, and uh, so this was also an opportunity for me to explore part of that heritage musically, which I did for 2 or 3 years until I finally I started to hit the beginning of the big time. There was a gig that all the folk people did in the village at a place called Izzy Young's Folklore Center. Well, Izzy Young's place was right down the street from the Village Vanguard, and after I played at Izzy Young's, this buddy of mine who was involved in the folk music world but also a jazz fan, and we walked up the street to the Vanguard, and there was Gary Bartz playing. And I walked in the door. It wasn't terribly expensive then to go, so we went in to catch the set, and it was like Gary Bartz was calling out to me, "Hey, this is your folk music here, man." You know, and I actually got to tell him that many years later. Um, and so I I got myself a saxophone again because I had played saxophone before, and I for some reason did I still have I can't remember. Anyway, I started incorporating the saxophone into kind of folk jug bands and going to jam sessions, and gradually left the folk music world mostly and became completely dedicated to playing jazz.
Well, then how did this interest in Tad Dameron come forth?
Oh, that was from when I was a teenager. I loved his. I became particularly attracted to the little big bands, the 9-10 piece bands, not only of Tad's but also the ones on the West Coast, which I later realized were inspired by Tad, or at least that's my take. But my stepfather, who was in the book trade, brought me home Barry Ulanoff's book that has a section on Tad Dameron in it. And Tad, in 1961, came back on the scene after being incarcerated for a few years because of his drug habit. And so he was back on the scene, so I was learning more and more about him and listening to his music, and I really was drawn to his aesthetic. That he said, to paraphrase him, there's enough ugliness in the world. I'm here to create beauty, and that resonated with me and was reinforced also by my composition teacher, who taught us that that we musicians are here to serve the community, to bring all sorts of things that music brings to the general population. So so he's, not only musically but aesthetically, Tad Dameron was very important to me from, say, around the age of 15.
Fascinating, and then that led you to create the book, to do the research and become sort of the authority on Tad Dameron through, in jazz.
Yes, eventually. I wrote a tune, and I heard his influence in the tune, and I went to the library and was disappointed to find that there were no books on him. So I got it in my head that a book should be written. And gradually I acquired the skills of research, and when I went back to get my master's degree and so on, and just plugged away at it till I finally got it done.
That was in 2013. The book is still available, correct? You can get that on Amazon, elsewhere?
Yes, it's published by the University of Michigan Press, and you can get it from Amazon, but I always recommend going directly to University of Michigan Press, because they've got to go there. Everybody's got to go, and you can get it right from the source.
We're talking with author, educator, photographer, and of course musician, great saxophonist Paul Combs, whose 80th birthday will be celebrated at the Jazz Lounge on June 7th. We'll continue our conversation in just a few moments here on Inside Art on San Diego's Jazz 88.3. Funding for Inside Art comes from the members of Jazz 88.3, where your support brings the joy and history of jazz and all of the arts to San Diego. To become a member, visit jazz88.org/donate. I'm Dave Drexler with Inside Art, this week celebrating the 80th milestone birthday of one of the indispensable jazz figures in our community, Paul Combs. Paul Combs will have a special birthday concert in his honor on June 7th at the Jazz Lounge in the Rolando College area. Paul, when did you decide to make San Diego your home?
I had grown up with winter, both in the Midwest and on the East Coast, and winter never bothered me until I turned 65. And then, as I say, I asked myself while shoveling out my car if I wanted to keep doing that uh, around the time I turned 70, and the answer was no. And I already knew a half a dozen people here, and was familiar with the California, at least up to the Bay Area. Also, I have friends up that way, and I came out looking to where did I want to land, and as soon as I got to San Diego, I just felt, yeah, this is it.
Well, you are not alone in that. That is a very similar journey for a lot of people listening in the audience today, of course. And you've become such an important promoter of jazz in our community. Tell us a little bit about some of your involvement in San Diego jazz to this point.
Well, I've performed as often as I can at the various different venues that were available, and I put out a little newsletter, and I've supported KSDS and just tried to support the scene, um, not only as a performer but as a listener, as an audience member, and I've tried to do my part to spread the word as to what's happening around town. And then around the time that Leonard opened the Jazz Lounge, I approached him about performing there, and he said, "Yeah, come on in." And I was just so taken with performing there because it's just a very special experience. It's so intimate and focused on the music. I think the only other than big concerts at big venues, that kind of focus is only available at a couple of other places. Of course, the events that Holly Hoffman organizes, and the ones that Chuck Perrin organizes under the name of Dizzy's. Um, so uh, I was invited to help out, and I became a volunteer there as well as a performer there. So I just try to do my part to keep the awareness of jazz and our wonderful jazz community. Uh, this is a this is an extraordinary community of musicians that we have here, and I feel really honored to be part of it.
Well, who will be performing with you on June 7th at this birthday concert at the Jazz Lounge?
This rhythm section has sort of become a working band when I do have the opportunity to perform. The pianist is Cat Shoemaker. Cat and I also do some duo things occasionally. And on bass is Antar Martin, and the drummer is Richard Sellers. And if I can put this band together, then I'm happy. Although, if I can't quite get each and every one of them, there are some other wonderful musicians that I enjoy playing with that I can call upon. But that's who I have on June 7th.
June 7th, that starts at 6:15 as far as that listing is
Well, yeah,
concerned.
6:15. If one opts to have dinner, it's at 6:15.
Okay.
The show starts at 7. And with the Jazz Lounge, as a courtesy, they will order something in, which you find out what's available on the when you get your ticket, or you're perfectly welcome to bring something if you want to have some dinner before the show.
That's part of the charm of the Jazz Lounge, but yet it's really focused on the music like few other places, as you mentioned. Well, Paul Combs, you're also representing the Jazz Lounge here in talking about their special fundraiser. Let us know what this is all about.
Okay. Well, Leonard started this, and I believe he had already some nonprofit thing that he had set up that he was operating under, but it wasn't completely appropriate. And that's my understanding. I may not be entirely correct on that. But what did happen this last year was that a proper 501c3 was formed for the Jazz Lounge, known as the Jazz Lounge Corporation. And after 5 years of hanging in there and growing, Leonard has a bigger vision than just presenting concerts. And this includes an educational component. We have provided space for colleges and the Performing Arts High School to have their students take to an actual stage and get that experience. And there have been some workshops here and there. Most recently, Amy Nolte did a workshop. Anyway, part of the plan is to expand into this area. And actually, let me quote from the official thing here. We're trying to raise significant funds to be able to expand community outreach and bring jazz education to underserved students. And that's the official words from the website. And there may be some exciting developments otherwise coming up, but people will just have to stay tuned. So this is an effort to really get properly funded for the bigger vision that Leonard and the board of the Jazz Lounge have for the Jazz Lounge going forward.
This is a unique event, though, being a marathon, 30,
Yes.
30 continuous hours of live performances.
That's correct. This idea of a marathon sort of has its roots in something that Leonard tried a couple of years ago for a Guinness World Record for 100 hours, consecutive hours of live streamed music.
I remember that.
We're still waiting to hear from Guinness as to whether we met all the requirements anyway. So this is a shorter one. It starts at 6 o'clock on Friday, the 29th of May, and it's going to run all the way through until midnight of Saturday, the 30th. And there's an opening concert that is free, but of course, donations are appreciated. And then there are two ticketed concerts, one at 7 and another at 9, headed up by Amy Nolte, and Leonard will be a special guest on those. And then there'll be jam sessions and performances going on through the night and the next day. And then at 6 p.m. on Saturday, another ticketed concert featuring Leonard. And then at 9 will be a concert with Peter Sprague. And those are the ticketed events. And there'll be another concluding jam session, if I remember correctly. I think that's the way it's going to work. That'll take us to midnight. And all of this information can be found at the Jazz Lounge's website, which is thejazzlounge.live. Thejazzlounge.live. And the marathon is the first thing you see if you go there. The tickets for the special concerts that go with this are the click for the tickets is right there at the top. And of course, down below, you'll see upcoming events, and that's where the general program of the things that are coming up all sorts of concerts featuring local, but also the Jazz Lounge has also become a stop for touring artists because it's so small, just to maybe fill in a night here and there when they're touring. And we do attract from time to time some people of nationally known.
You sure do.
And there's one coming up in June that I want to mention, and that is on June 17th. Tierney Sutton, accompanied by Tamir Handelman, will be playing. And I think that's going to be 2 shows. And they just have or just will have a new release of duo performances. This is sort of connected with their tour supporting that recording. So that's an idea of that. In the past, we've had, most recently, Tamir was here with John Clayton not that long ago. And Jonathan Kreisberg performed with his quartet. All sorts of people have played here, including Rachel Z and Omar Hakim. So we've Randy Brecker played here.
Peter Bernstein and Larry Goldings and Bill Stewart, that trio.
That's right. Yes. Thank you. I have to remember all of these things. So the Jazz Lounge and the idea of raising the money is also to expand our attractiveness for touring artists on occasion, so that it's all part of trying to raise and have a solid budget to work with.
Certainly a worthy cause for any listeners of this program and Jazz 88.3. The Jazz Lounge Fundraising Marathon, May 29th and 30th. And the Jazz Lounge will also be celebrating my guest in this program, Paul Combs, on the occasion of his 80th birthday with an 80th birthday concert on Sunday, June 7th. Paul, great to speak with you again. Congratulations on your milestone, and thanks for joining us on Inside Art.
Well, thank you, Dave, for giving us the time.
The Paul Combs Birthday Concert will be held Sunday, June 7th at 7 p.m. in the Jazz Lounge, located at 6818 El Cajon Boulevard in the Rolando College area. The Jazz Lounge Fundraiser Marathon, featuring 30 consecutive jazz events over 30 hours, runs Friday, May 29th through Saturday, May 30th. And tickets and more information for both events can be found at thejazzlounge.live. Inside Art is made possible with support from the members of Jazz 88.3. Replays and extended versions of every Inside Art broadcast are available online at jazz88.org/Inside Art. Our theme is created and performed by Bill Mays, whose music is available at billmays.net. Again, my thanks to Paul Combs. For Jazz 88.3, I'm Dave Drexler. Join me again on air and online for another edition of Inside Art. Jazz Inspired is next.